بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Inshallah, continuing in our monthly seminars or webinars in the feminine journey. This week, inshallah, or this month, we'll be taking a look at etiquette for the female students. And obviously, this is a huge topic, much bigger than the time that were allotted. So obviously, it's not meant to be comprehensive, but just to be a kind of introduction and also exploration of some of the important etiquettes for the female student knowledge, just like there is, and most of it applies to the males as well. Now, before starting, we have to be mindful that the topic of etiquette, the ulama, they always proceed before the discussion of talab al-ilm, seeking Islamic knowledge, and even after it. For adab or adab and akhlaq, mannerisms, and etiquette never end in terms of the study. The person continues to study them, renew their attention. And therefore, we need to, inshallah ta'ala, make this an inspiration to continue our studies, to improve ourselves in this angle. And this, inshallah ta'ala, might even motivate many of us to renew that, as well as sharing those different benefits to enhance our communities. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Without taking any more time, let's just get right into it. Here we have the topic of adab, and we're going to look at these two terminologies, adab and akhlaq. And when it comes to the words adab and akhlaq, sometimes you find the ulama mentioning them interchangeably. Some of them they specialize or specify adab from akhlaq, but generally many of the ulama see them to be quite similar, and some of them say they're interchangeable. But since we're talking about adab, etiquette, we're going to focus on that, which has to do with what a Muslimah does, the do's and don'ts of good behavior and good character. So here, the ulama, when they talk about the word adab, they begin by first mentioning its definition from the linguistic perspective, and that is when a person looks at the word adab, alif, dal, ba, the origin, al-adabu, it means a person using charm, good treatment, dealings, humor, all that which is considered praiseworthy towards others. And if someone knows then that this term, al-adab, coming from this angle, then the ulama, they took it from this towards what the Sharia would consider good and treatment and good and praiseworthy, not just with the people. Because adab is its origin or source for most people is what is considered from the urf and the awaid, the customs of the people. So Ibn Mandur, he writes, adab is called this because it invites a person towards praiseworthy deeds and qualities and prohibits them from ugly and foul qualities. Because literally the word adab also shares the root with the word banquet, an invitation to a banquet or a meal. So when we look at this point, we can see the adab is something you embody, you take on in order to become, inshallah ta'ala, the best version of yourself, and more important, best Muslim that you can be towards others. But Islamically, we have a specific definition, because you can't just rely upon adab from the urf, as we'll get to towards the end of this seminar. Adab and urf are connected, adab and customs. The Sharia tells us what's good and bad. And that is, as Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned, Hafid Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, al-adabu isti'malu ma yuhmadu qawlan wa fi'lan. And this is probably the best definition the ulama say given. One of the best definitions. Al-adabu, etiquette, is to use what is praiseworthy of speech and actions. Okay, so we have to pay attention to this. Ma yuhmadu. What is praiseworthy? Praised by who? Number one, the Sharia. And then number two, secondary, the people, as we'll come to later, about the issue of muru'ah and khawarim al-muru'ah. And so when you look at this term, then you can see that the adab, the etiquette for the female student knowledge or the student knowledge in general, is something which cannot be underemphasized. Because if you don't have adab, You don't have anything to offer the people. You don't have anything to offer the people. And this is something where you can see that somebody may be very knowledgeable, very beneficial, but unfortunately, their adab is a preventative from people taking them seriously or benefiting from them, or even sometimes a preventative from their da'wah spreading. Right? So we're going to see that the ulama, they embody the best of the adab, and the salaf took it very seriously. So if we look at this definition, then we know quickly that adab is something we all need. Now, with that being said, the etiquette for the females to knowledge, is it different than that of the men? That's the first question we have to think about. And the answer is no, right? Because we already know that the men and women in this angle, they share the same source, the Quran and Sunnah. And therefore, the ulama, when they talk about adab, the male or female writers, they do not differentiate between the etiquette for women or men. The Quran and Sunnah has come for both. Yes, there's some things that women shouldn't do that men can do, or vice versa. So we'll see that. But if you look at the writers, the ulama, the female writers, like Abdul al-Wadi'iyah, ta'ala, in her book Sifat al-Mar'atun Saliha, the Sifat of the pious woman, she mentions a lot of adab in there, a lot of the etiquette, and she doesn't differentiate. Most of what she mentions, all of it is dedicated to both genders. And this is because the Quran and Sunnah came to rectify and to elevate the manners of both the men and the women. That's one. Secondly, we have the principle we mentioned last lecture, and we're going to mention again. The ulama, they mentioned the qaida, the principle, and that is ما ثبت, that which has been established. ما ثبت في حق الرجال, that which has been established in relation to men. ثبت is also established في حق النساء, in relation to the women. إلا بدليل, except with evidence. So this principle we mentioned the last time, ما ثبت, that which has been established in the Quran and Sunnah authentically, in terms of any practice في حق الرجال, in relation to the men. ثبت في حق النساء, it's also established in relation to the women. إلا بدليل, except by evidence. This was mentioned by Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah. So if you remember this, then you don't have to worry about if something is women specific or not, except to have proof, as we'll see some of them later, some of the ones that are unique to women. So just saying this, because someone may look here and look and say, well, what about, why is this, for example, the general evidences? Again, that's what we've studied, alhamdulillah, already. With that being said, now we need to categorize adab. Imam Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, he actually has a very nice categorization of al-adab, and it's not the only one who does it, but I put it into the chart here so we can see it nicely. In order to have good etiquette, you have to start with Allah. And therefore, etiquette is two categories. Ibn Qayyim, Madarij Salikin, volume 3, page 140. He says the etiquette is number one, between you and Allah. Number two, between you and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And number three, between you and others. Number 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you understand this, the etiquette that you need between you and others has to first start between you and Allah. Because you can't have good etiquette with the creation if you don't have adab with Allah. And that's going to come with what? How do you carry yourself between you and Allah, practicing your deen, seeking Islamic knowledge, even the way you study knowledge? Are you truthful? Are you sincere? Do you worship Allah properly? And so this is very important, right, when it comes to trying to develop the etiquette. But since our focus, inshallah, for this seminar, this lecture will be the third one, I just put Ibn Qayyim's words on the side there. And Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, if you go back to Madarij Salikin, those who can read it in Arabic, it's very nice what he writes. Fantastic, right? Speech. So today, our focus will be number 3 because of the time and the limited effort. Otherwise, adab ma'allah, so important. An example of adab ma'allah is when you're praying salah. When you're praying salah, you're not supposed to spit towards the qibla. You're not supposed to turn your attention from the qibla. Why? إن أحدكم, very any one of you, إذا قام للصلاة, if he stands up for salah, فهو يناجي ربه. He's speaking to his Lord. Nabi Sallallahu said. So he said, let him not turn it from the qibla, don't speak towards it. So Nabi Sallallahu teaching adab ma'allah, standing in front of Allah. It's supposed to teach you adab because you're lowering your gaze, you're learning humility, you're putting sujood, so that's the key here. So the foundation of adab, if you want to be good to your fellow sisters, you got to have a good relationship with Allah. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you want a high, lofty character. What kind of adab? All adab. Ma Allah, firstly, then with his khalq, with the creation. But us, if we want to really develop our etiquette, we have to think about that. But today, like I said, we're going number 3. Ibn Qayyim, he writes, as with etiquette with the creation, then it's treating them in accordance with to the different levels with behavior that suits them. And that's a key. In accordance to the people's levels. For every level, there is an etiquette. And for each person's level, there is a specific etiquette. For the parents, there is a specific etiquette. For the father, there's even a more specific etiquette. With the scholars, there's another type of etiquette. With the Muslim ruler, there's an etiquette suitable for him. And with the peers, there's an etiquette suitable for them. With the strangers, there's an etiquette other than the etiquette of their friends and companions. With the guests, there's an etiquette other than the etiquette family. So here you learn quickly that if you want to have good etiquette, especially as a student of knowledge with others, you have to differentiate according to the manazil, the stations of people, and their positions in society and nearness and furthest from you. Because the friend is not like that, stranger and the family is not like that, friend and the alim is not like that, ami and like this. This you may see, sisters, is why so many people maybe already have bad etiquette. This might be it, starting from here, because they treat everybody the same. That's a mistake. Can't treat all people all the same. It's not authentic narration from Aisha radiallahu anha narrated, if I remember correctly, but they narrated anyways, right? That the scholars mentions a principle. Put the people in their correct positions. And this is correct in general, right? Even though it's not a athar sahih, some ulama make tahseen of the hadith. They say it's Hassan, but the more correct view has weakness, but it still doesn't mean that it's not true. So if we start with this, today's focus would be the etiquette of a student of knowledge with her fellow sisters. This is today's focus. And the reason why I want to specify it to this one, because number one, the need for it. Number two, the timing. Right? We don't have time to go through all of the other etiquettes. So inshallah ta'ala, it becomes clear the scope of our lecture as we're going along, so that someone may later on understand why we did not talk about other forms of adab, etiquette. We have to talk about this part here. We have to talk about this, which is that in order to have good adab and adab, good etiquette with others, you must study it. Yes, there is a concept, and we do believe in Islam, that people are born with good etiquette. That people are born with not good etiquette, but good akhlaq, good nature and instincts. That's the origin for many people. Their behavior comes from what Allah blessed them with. For Allah, He blessed people and divided amongst us our rizq, the same way He divided amongst us, likewise our akhlaq and our character. But the ulama, for the most part, mention that akhlaq, which has to do with innate things, and adab often have to do with, alongside that, adab have to do with, etiquette have to do with the do's and don'ts, the character, the things you do, the do's and don'ts, the protocol. Akhlaq and adab, even though someone could have from some innate and instinctual qualities, they need to learn. Even Imam Ibn Rufy, he writes in Adab al-Shar'iyyah, one of the best books on adab, he writes, rahimahullah, it is sunnah to learn an adab or adab, good disposition and behavior, virtue and good conduct, according to both the legislation and customs. So look at that, how he put two sources for adab, al-shara' wal-urf. And this is important. The origin for adab, if you want to know what something is good or not, you look to two sources, Quran wa Sunnah, al-shara', legislation, and then the urf, the customs, al-urf al-shar'i, the legislative urf. I mean, this terminology is important. The legislative customs, not the customs of the kuffar or the fusaq or the others. The legislated one, the one the Sharia considers mu'tabara, considers acceptable, considerable, acceptable. Hence, every place and every city and country has their specific etiquette that's culturally bound, if you want to use that language. Everybody with me so far? Because some of the etiquette and do's and don'ts are not in the Quran and Sunnah. In fact, some of the sources, the ulama, they mentioned, in order to say something is no good or not, is the urf of the people. And that's a good benefit. Why? Because when we talk to each other and say, so and so, I don't think it's a good idea you did this, or I don't think it's a good idea you did that, we must have what? A source. Where are you getting that from? The Quran and Sunnah or the customs? And of course, if all the customs available, the customs of Salaf and the Sahaba and the people before us is better than ours. So that's already given to Sahaba and Salaf. If they consider something blameworthy, then it should be avoided as well, because their urf is considered acceptable in our Sharia, and that's a different discussion. As-Safarini, rahimahullah, he said something similar as well. Now, the Salaf used to learn etiquette, and this is why we are learning it, because no one can just tell themselves, I'm already expert, mashallah, I'm well-mannered. Abdul Yazid, he says, rahimahullah, we asked Hudayfa radiallahu ta'ala to tell us of a person resembling to some extent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in good appearance and straightforward behavior, so that we may learn from him good manners and acceptable conduct. Hudayfa radiallahu ta'ala said, I don't know anyone who's closer in resembling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in appearance and conduct than Ibn Abd, who is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala. Here, we take the benefit that the Sahaba used to look to one another, especially their shuyukh and the ulama, to learn adab, to take from the adab like they took from the ilm. Who's Ibn Mas'ud again? He's a Sahabi, he's a senior companion, he's a scholar, and he's and a master of the Quran and the fiqh. So the ulama used to, like the Hudayf and others, used to go back to him to take the ilm. And other than him, right, they used to go back to him, right, to see his judgments. And so that he teaches us that he used to learn adab from him. Here we also find an example I put below that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud anhu, the Sahaba literally used to go to him to see the conduct and take it from him, literally. So they would come to him and they would emulate him to see what he does. And you can see the story when the Sahaba found the people of innovation gathered together and, doing the tasbih or the dhikr of Allah, the remembrance of Allah in a circle in congregation. They waited for Ibn Mas'ud. They came to him to see what he would do and seek his judgment. And this shows us again there's a culture of adab building. So our focus should be elevating our communities by teaching etiquette, proper behavior, the protocols and do's and don'ts. And it's super interesting as well that this topic in the Quran and Sunnah and the books of the ulama are plentiful, but the fact that we need to implement it. With knowledge comes practice. That's why as many of the ulama after them would do the same. Ibn Sirin rahimahullah says, they used to, the Salaf, learn good manners and conduct like they would learn knowledge. I mentioned خطيب البغدادي in جامع أخلاق والراوي and Abdullah الوادعية, she says it's إسناد الصحيح. Look at this, how they used to learn knowledge, ilm, because it is ilm, right? It's a type of ilm. And this knowledge, the ulama, they call it ilm al-adab. Ibn Qayyim in Madarij al-Salikin, he called it the ilm of adab, right? And again, we've covered classes on this before, so we're going to move on quickly here because of the time. We want to get as much we can get out of this. Basically, Sa'ad, likewise, he says, rahimahullah, when he observes his companions of hadith, Ahlul Hadith, this is a proof that Salafiyun have to be the most well-behaved and the most respectful and the most caring and most kind of people. Right? The best etiquette should be with Ahlul Hadith. When he saw Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, deficient in this behavior, he said, what is this? You are more in need of a small amount of good manners than you are of a great deal of knowledge. He couldn't take that in. Ahlul Ilm, Ahlul Hadith, today's time, Salafiyun, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we have bad etiquette. And this is the reality, brothers and sisters, especially sisters, we have to take reality. That if we do a stock inventory of all of the community, can we say everybody, mashallah, who are from the Talibatul Ilm, those who are seeking Islamic knowledge? And otherwise, our etiquette is mashallah. And if the answer is no, then that's what we're all here today to learn more. And again, we're all in it. The men are not any different either. We all need to learn. Last statement, Makhlad ibn Hussein said, we are more in need of a small amount of manners than a lot of hadith. Again, the isnad is sahih, according to Abdullah al-Wadi'iyah. طيب, the ulama then, to show the importance of this, they would say statements and sayings, just to give us one. Al-Qaadir al-Baghdadi in Jami' al-Akhlaq, al-Akhlaq wal-Rawi, he mentions a very famous lines the scholars would say, the saying, علم بلا أدب كالنار بلا حطب. That knowledge without manners or etiquette is like fire without firewood. And وأدب بلا علم, and etiquette without knowledge, كالجسم بلا روح, it's like a soul, a body without a soul. So the first part is very important. علم, knowledge, which we're all hoping to gain, بلا أدب, without etiquette. كالنار is like fire without بلا حطب, without firewood. How far is that fire going to burn? And this is what, in fact, today, right, our teacher, Faisal, he put that audio about manners and etiquette with the teacher, and it can show you a lot when the scholars talk about a person's success in relation to etiquette. So with all this being said, where do we go from here? Well, right, we need to start thinking about the female callers and the sisters specifically. And we're going to go back to the book of Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh, Ta'ala. his book we cited before, The Female Caller, Different Ways of Calling to Allah. In that lecture turned to a book, he writes, interactions are a way in which the call is given for da'wah. So adab, your etiquette in the masjid, in your house, with your sisters, when you go out, it's your da'wah. It's a type of da'wah. And the Muslim woman must know how to deal with others, such as herself, her parents, her husband, her children, those around her, other women in society. She needs to know how to interact correctly with men, the scholars, the sinners, as well as those who disagree with her in her opinions. As we'll see, that in order to be a student of knowledge, you have adab al-khilaf, right? When sisters don't agree on a mas'ala, an issue, adab. And sometimes you find some people, when you differ with them, as if you, like, you did something, you took something from them, as if it's not a mas'ala, which is already khilafi or ikhtilafi or to begin with. So we have to learn this as well. Again, it's all of us have to remind ourselves of the importance of these things. He says then she also needs to know how to explain herself when these differences occur, as well as how to aid those understanding that refuse to accept some of the truth, and those that are either too severe or easy, so they begin to get rid of things of Sharia, they're not from it. Knowing how to properly interact is something that female college and teachers must pay close attention to, because it's directly tied into how we carry ourselves. We're in dire need in these days, and he talks about the importance of needing female scholars and da'iyat, and inshallah. So at the end of the speech, and it's nice. This book again has good benefits, and this is the point: learning how to interact with others. It is what all of us are in need of. But when you think about da'wah, what is da'wah that me and you are often thinking about when we say da'wah? Most of us think da'wah is I get on a microphone or I sit down in front of a sitting and I teach. That's a no' min da'wah. That's a type of da'wah. But what about when I walk in the masjid and nobody heard me or saw me yet, and say anything, or no one knows who I am, and I just came and I said salam alaikum to everybody, and I'm very kind and welcoming, I'm warm. That is a type of da'wah. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. Look at the connection. Who is better than the one who calls towards Allah and does good deeds? The connection between da'wah and amal. So Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, others in the tafsir, they also mention our actions are from the best and one of the most pivotal forms of da'wah. People, they look at you before they see you speak. I'm going to speak. I'm going to talk about it later. So one of the mistakes that we might find is that when we talk about adab, we might be forgetting that. So nobody can even listen to you or even trust you if they don't feel that you're somebody approachable or someone worthy to be listened to. So an example of the Sahaba and Salaf, especially the Salaf Salih, pious predecessors, they will look at people's manners and character before even learning to take or deciding to take knowledge from them. Why? So they look at the person and say, look, how does he pray? How does he interact with people? How does he carry himself or her? And then it's okay, this guy's worthy, or this person is worthy of seeking knowledge. I think that part is very powerful, because imagine now, all of us, we elevate our adab to a higher plateaus. Suddenly, people are going to be intrigued by what? The knowledge that you're studying, the things that you're doing, because of the way you carry yourself. So this is very important, what the Sheikh is saying about knowing these things and not downgrading them, because no matter how much you memorize, how much you understand, how much you know, people are going to make a judgment about who you are based on your etiquette. Which leads us then to the most of today's lesson, which is the key etiquette. What are these etiquettes that women need? Today, I want to just cover, due to the time, right, 5 key etiquettes or key etiquette that a female student of knowledge must have in order to, number one, benefit, right, herself and those around her, but number 2, in order for her to be a successful student and caller, and to develop, thirdly, healthy sisterhood and community. 5 of them. And again, how much adab are there? Like Fajr was mentioning, and in the lecture he posted today, some of the ulama mentioned more than 100 comes to adab talib ilm, and some of it has to do with ilm, some has to do without ilm. As some of the ulama mentioned, less than that. So again, this is by no measure or such an imagination considered comprehensive. This is just picking at certain things, and inshallah, they could benefit us. And obviously, and if maybe in the future, we could talk more about or continue this kind of discussion. Let's begin with the first one. For the female student knowledge, number 1, she must be a role model in her statements and actions. She has to be a leader and role model for others, because she is. If you're seeking Islamic knowledge, you're already a role model. You're talib al-ilm, right? Talabat al-ilm, right? Talabat al-ilm, you are a role model. You are a role model. People are going to looking up to you because you do what other people don't do. You open books, you memorize things, you come to the masjid often, or you listen online. You're doing something others don't do. So you must be a role model. You must accept that. And this is why if we don't, later we're going to find ourselves, right, falling short in our example. So how do we know that we're supposed to be role models? Maybe sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hadith Abbas, he says, the bad example is not for us. ليس لنا مثل السوء. There is no bad example with us, right? So if you think about a Muslim, this is the adab of the Muslim in general. So even those of us who are listening and may say to themselves, I don't think that I'm a student of knowledge, or some may say, I don't identify myself with it as a student of knowledge. We tell them, no problem. Even if you're not a student of knowledge, you're still supposed to have, like this, for example, be this like this. You're supposed to be a role model. So what does it mean, this hadith? The Prophet explained, alayhi whoever takes back his present or a gift is like a dog that swallows back its vomit. So without going to the second part of the hadith about etiquette for taking back gifts, let's talk about the first part. Ibn Shaykh ibn Uthaymin, in his commentary of Bulugh al-Maram, he writes, as-saw here, right? Because again, there's more than one wording of the hadith. Laysa lana mathal as-su, another one has saw, right? That's a different wording slightly. So if we look at the wording here, what does it mean? He says it means defect or shortcoming. And method means quality. That is, there's no bad quality or attribute in us Muslims because Islam is the greatest in worship, action, character. So there shouldn't be. This is what it's supposed to tell us. You shouldn't have that. Muslims should not be bad examples, even though we may be at times, right, without really realizing that we should avoid it. So this hadith establishes the case that Muslims are supposed to be role models, let alone, right, students of knowledge who are learning the deen, sacred knowledge. They need to be role models, and they must accept that they are, even if they don't always realize it. So when you say to yourself, I seek Islamic knowledge, I go to the masjid, I seek knowledge online, I come to this Tuesday classes, you are a role model. You are supposed to be a role model. You have to be careful what you say and do. Why? Because the people look to the student knowledge, what they say and do, and they take notice, and they make judgments, and they make impressions. To show you this, Abdul Rahman is an example now. Abdul Rahman bin Aban ibn Uthman ibn Affan al-Qurashi. So who is this? This is the grandson of Uthman bin Affan. He used to do a lot of worship and servitude to Allah. So one day Ali bin Abdullah ibn Abbas saw him. He saw him, this Imam, and he was impressed by his worship and guidance, so he followed him in good. Just seeing him, how he was at his ibadah and his servitude to Allah, he was so overwhelmed, or overcome by this example, he just followed him and became a follower of his. And this is mentioned in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, Imam Dhahabi, as cited by As-Sadlan in Ma'anim fi Tariq Talab Ilm. And this example is one of many, showing that the role model, people look at your actions before they look at your statement. Before you begin preaching, before they even know you're going to teach a class, before people even know you're a teacher or or even a student of knowledge, a seeker of knowledge, they just look at you and say, wow, like this person's akhlaq, mashallah, is nice. They're welcoming, they're kind, they're friendly, they're helpful. When people make those later, it's so easy to tell them, hey, you want to come to the masjid? Or can I share benefit with you? Who will not take it when they already trust you and see you to be a person of khair? So the first thing we have to be mindful of this, we are role models. So if we are role models, we got to make sure when we're in public and in private, we got to try our best always to adhere to ourselves to the standard of the Quran wa Sunnah, the standard of the Quran and Sunnah, and that which is considered the best. That which considers the best. Yes, at times we make mistakes, at times we fall short, but that's the first key etiquette. Because you may notice some people, even though they, mashallah, they're seeking all knowledge, they forget that whatever they do and say, people take it and attribute it to the deen. People attribute it to the deen. So if you said something out of pocket, or you did something which is probably not the best, some will say, well, that's how people of deen do it. That's the people who are Salafi, right? You probably heard that people say, making these judgments. These are people who follow the way of the Salaf, this is how they behave. And you're thinking ahead, like, how are you making a judgment about methodology based on the practice of a minority? That's not how we do it. But you know how people do it. People judge based on what they see of the minority. They don't judge based on the ulama, the leaders of da'wah, and the talibat, and the sheikh and the sheikhas. No, they don't do that. They look at what people around them do. So we just have to be mindful of this point, especially when you're in public or you're in a gathering with your fellows people, especially people who might not know you. And we're going to talk about that later. And to remind us, the Quran teaches us to always have good manners anyways. إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. This Quran guides that which is utmost and best. Here, Shasara Sheikh now gives a practical example of what we're talking about. He says in the female color again, some sisters again, this is again some, so not all, when they become religious and try to be upright, which is something that she's thanked for, she begins to do some things in her house that is unacceptable to those that live with her. So they see that which she's upon or does, that it's impossible for others to apply in their lives because she does not have a proper way to carry out these things so that they are acceptable by others. So she begins to deal with it and talk to everyone like they are the same level. She doesn't differentiate between those in authority and those that are in charge of adults and children. As well, she does not make a difference between talking and dealing with her father, mother, or spouse. This shows a lack of wisdom in her. We say that this is because when we look into the legislative proofs and the way of the pious predecessors, we find that everyone has a specific way that we deal with them. And we already got that from Ibn Qayyim in Daraj Salikin. So you see what he's talking about here. At home, people look, your family, your siblings, your children, your spouse, and they see, is this, especially if you have sisters or children, when they look at you and they say, is this a balanced, realistic application of Islam? Or is this a type of extremism in their eyes? And what I mean by extremism is that they don't realize Quran and Sunnah is easy and moderate already. But our application with wisdom and knowledge has to show them that this is what the deen looks like. You can be just like me. You can practice deen the way I'm doing it. But when they see sometimes, especially when you first become practicing, right? You go 0 to 100. And suddenly people say, SubhanAllah, right? I can't be like this person. Or they see that you don't have the maturity yet to differentiate between different people in the house or different people around you. So they say, no. If this is what it means you're practicing, you don't give people the due rights. I don't want to be practicing that. And it's not something we don't even have to tell people. Subconsciously, people are making those judgments. And you can also see the impact of that when they come to try to think about practicing the deen. Because everybody has that moment in their life where they want to change and turn a new leaf. They want to become practicing. If they're Muslims, if they're not Muslims, they want to come to faith. Are they going to come to us because we're a good example of what it looks like? Or are they going to say, well, I don't want to become like this person because I think they're either too falling short or they're too much. So the benefit we take, you're a role model at home, in the masjid, on the street, when you walk outside, when you're at work, when you're at school, wherever you are. And so we always have to remember that if we're role models, to follow the etiquette of the Quran and Sunnah, but also try their best to be as the Quran and Sunnah wants us to be. So we're not supposed to be different than at home than we are in the masjid or in other things like this. We've got to try our best to be the same. So I think this is a very useful part to begin with. So take on that point, especially community building and sisterhood building. That sisters have to work together, just like brothers have to work together amongst themselves to create an environment which is caring, but also considerate. Because the people who are more knowledgeable, you have more responsibilities. That's the thing. That's the point. If you're a layperson, people can excuse you. So they don't know any better. When you say you come to dars, you durus, you study, and then you're raising your voice or you're talking bad to others or you're doing something inappropriate, some will say, oh, this person, I don't think they're really studying. I don't think this is what talab ilm is supposed to look like. Moving along then is the next one. If you're a role model, the second key element as key etiquette is being gentle with their fellow sisters. And this one is so important, especially in today's time. We're living, as Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah said, zaman al-rifq. We're living in the zaman, the era of leniency. Yes, there's tashaddud, there is strictness, there does exist severity, but that's not the asl. And I think a lot of us, we need to remind ourselves of that. The origin is kindness, right? And gentleness. And look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the best example ever of etiquette and manners. And you can read his seerah and it's plentiful. How he dealt with people. Allah describes him and describes a bounty. And Allah says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. And by the mercy of Allah, you dealt with him gently. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. And had you been severe and harsh-hearted, they would have broken away from you. And the Sahaba. فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ. So pardon them, overlook their faults. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ. And seek forgiveness for them. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Seek consultation or consult them in affairs. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ. Then when you have taken a decision, فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Put your trust in Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. Allah loves those who put their trust in Him. Beautiful. Reminded Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's overarching description of his da'wah and his personhood, rifq, rahmah. And this goes hand in hand with ilm. Okay, sisters, because someone will say, what's the connection here? What's the connection here between these two? Ilm and rahmah, they go hand in hand. Knowledge and mercy go hand in hand. And this is why if a person says to himself, I'm more knowledgeable, Inshallah, every day we're learning more. Then how are you? How is your etiquette and your mercy? إغاثة اللفان Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah writes, فهكذا الرجل, like this a man, كل ما اتسع علمه اتسعت رحمته. And likewise, a man, every time his knowledge increases, his mercy increases. And that doesn't mean now we're not saying you can't be harsh at times to people who deserve it or in due times. This is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, imagine the origin, your default setting should be the with rahmah. Why? Because we're living in that time and people are attracted towards it, especially knowing that many people have already developed in their head whatever impression they have about the da'wah to haqq, right? The da'wah of haqq. So I highly recommend that we remember this, especially with your sisters. Be lenient, kind. In Allah al-Rafiq yuhib al-rifq. Hadith Aisha. Look what happened. Aisha, again, she's also a scholar later. A group of Jews at that time, Rasulullah, they came to him and said, Assalamu alaikum, death be upon you, Ya Rasulullah, or Ya Abul Qasim, right? So this is how they would respond to him. Nabi said, Wa alayk, or Wa alaykum, upon you what you said. Nabi was using good tactic and good manners, right? Returning the similar response without going overboard, without saying anything more. So Nabi, when he said this, Aisha said, but death and curse be upon you. Prophet said, Aisha, Allah is kind and lenient, and He likes the one who should be kind and lenient in all matters. And he said, having heard what I said to them likewise, wa alaikum. So here we learn a benefit. Nabi Sallallahu when he established this point, in Allah al-Rafiq, really Allah is kind and gentle. Yuhib al-Rifq, He loves leniency and kindness. That's the foundation. Because if you say to yourself, I am a person of knowledge, which of the two characteristics as a default setting is more conducive for people coming towards Islam or to the lessons, to foster sisterhood, right? Being lenient or being strict. And I'm not saying that we can't be, but I'm thinking about like the overarching description should be this way. And this is how we should keep it, especially when a person is closer to you. The closer they are, the more mercy they receive, and the more benefit of doubt when they make mistakes or kindness or trying to be more helpful in correcting them and going out of way to that. And this is important because the lay people, generally speaking, they proceed religious people to be strict. And where are they getting it from? They're making it up? Nope. They found examples of people who ascribe themselves to the Sunnah, yelling at them, shouting at them, being intolerant, not showing good hikmah or fiqh. And when people make mistakes, and they say, "Well, I don't want nothing to do with a community like that." So one of the things that we can learn from this is that since knowledge and mercy go together, and humility and kindness, start like that. If there's a need for someone to be harsh, it should be when it's allowed in the Sharia and when the boundaries are there. Again, that's why you notice some of the teachers, yes, they have disciplined students, have to oust them. Now, again, the Fajr's lecture he gave today or posted on the TorontoDawah YouTube has excellent examples of that. Shaykh al-Islam al-Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, how did he describe Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah? He says, Ahl Sunnah, hum a'rafu nas, they're the most knowledgeable of the people, bil haqq, of the truth. Hum arhamuhum, and they're the most merciful to the people, bil khalq, or arham nas bil khalq, and the most merciful people to the creation. Minhaj al-Sunnah, volume 1, page 157. Ahl Sunnah are the most knowledgeable people of the truth and the most merciful people to the creation. And some will say, how does that look? Well, when you see the ulama and the people of knowledge responding to the mistakes or correcting innovations or other things like this, that's from rahmah as well. So we need to think about this because a lot of times you may see that sometimes our interactions, playful as they may sound at times, or be may innocent as they may appear, can sometimes lack that mercy. Try to be more merciful, lean on that side. And to show this example, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam spoke about women specifically. And this one I'm going to get to the sisters now, because sisters, in comparison to the brothers, we know sisters in general are more sensitive to the words and actions that they come across, whether it be in the masjid or in the circle or otherwise. What is said to each other, what they do to each other. Yes, men also can be sensitive, but generally speaking, you might find that some of the sisters may not find some environments welcoming just because one interaction, some might have said something. So if we know that, look what the Quran and Sunnah tells us about this. Here we go. Anas bin Malik narrates, the Prophet ﷺ had a camel driver called Anjasha. And he had a very nice voice. The Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Oh, drive slowly, Anjasha, and be merciful or lenient with, or gentle with, so do not break the glass vessels." This wording has this, another wording says rifqan, I'd be lenient. But this one says, don't break the glass vessels. And Abu Qatada, Qatada said means the weak women. The interpretation of the hadith are many. I'm going to give more than one interpretation. The women generally physically are not as strong as men. That's one. In terms of the way he was driving the camel, was very tough. So they're in the caravan. He was driving very fast. So for the men, they might be used to bumping up and down with the camel as he's riding. But the women, it might be difficult for them. So that's one meaning. Second meaning, to do with their nature, more sensitive. And some ulama actually held that to be the interpretation as well. It's not only specific to the physical. Here we have Imam Ar-Ram Hurmuzi, rahimahullah, very famous scholar of hadith, 360 Hijrah, he died. Fath al-Bari ibn Hajj cites him saying the Prophet ﷺ described the women with the euphemism of glass vessels. Rifqa bil qawarir. Why glass vessels? Due to their softness or weakness in relation to movement. Women are resembled to glass vessels due to their softness, delicateness, and weak stature. Again, weak relative to the men. What is meant by all of this? Women are more lenient, more softer. So the language we're going to use one another. Sometimes we're harsh to each other, forgetting that you can actually make someone run from the da'wah. If you say something harsh to somebody, I mean, sometimes even from the men it happens. And Abdul Hafidhah Ta'ala, she writes, the kindness that has been commanded in the Sharia legislation is general. Leniency with the children, leniency with the elders, leniency of the rulers with the citizens, leniency with women, for they are weak. And she's a woman saying this. And the Prophet ﷺ said, be gentle with the glass vessels. Sibat al-Salihah, page 244. If this is something we understand, sisters, when the messages, when the classes, when you message one another, when we talk to each other, you have to be careful. Even amongst the men, sometimes you can say things different ways. Sometimes we say things and we don't even realize what the implications are. An example in point. Anas bin Malik narrates, one day he reached Safiya, the Hafsa said about her, you are the daughter of a Jewish woman, or daughter of the Jewish woman. So she started crying. Ooh, Safiya. By a word that reached her about Hafsa. Imagine a word reached her. Again, she didn't say it to her. The Prophet, directly. The Prophet, when he entered upon Safiya, she was crying. He said, what makes you cry? She said, Hafsa said to me that I'm a daughter of a Jew. Which is actually not even a lie, right? That's true. But we know what it meant. She was trying to lower her status compared to the fact that she's not Arab like them. And again, the jealousy amongst co-wives, there are many things going on here. Prophet said, and you are the daughter of a prophet, and your uncle's a prophet, you were married to a prophet. So what is she boasting about? I mean, the Prophet consoled her, telling her the truth that your uncle, your daughter of a prophet, who's Musa, because she's been Israel, right? So her lineage. Your uncle, Harun, was also a prophet, again, by lineage. You married the Prophet Muhammad, him, and you told Hafsa to fear Allah. Here, this hadith, Sahih hadith, what do we learn? This from many benefits we can take. One word. Reach Safiya from Hafsa, and Hafsa is a person of knowledge. Hafsa is alima, right? Hafid the Quran, sawam and qawwam. She prays all night and fasts all day. That's what the Prophet was told by Jibreel. And they were human beings. She said something, it wasn't the best. And look at their response. This is a reality that we can manage. Imagine today, we come to the masjid or any gathering, and one of us may say something off the cuff to another person. Sometimes it may even be haram, what we said, and sometimes in the sight of other people, it may be severe. And I'm saying this because I've noticed myself, again, with the men as well, that sometimes we say things that we don't even realize that how it may come across, because it's not about what you said, it's also who said it. Right? You said it, yeah, and you're a person who's supposed to be a khair, and don't forget about what you said. I didn't expect that from you, and that could take the da'wah somewhere else, right? And especially the community and the other sisterhood we're trying to develop. So if we understand this, I think it's a great example to be mindful of our speech, be gentle, be merciful, and we know that at the end of the day, this will allow us to just be. If we did say something wrong to one another, just forgive, and just remember the hadith. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said, "Ya ayyuhan nas, all mankind, inna minkum munaffirin." Some of you run others away from the da'wah and from the Islam on the masjid. And he was saying this in what? In relation to what? To when he heard about someone leading the salah and making it very long. So Nabi Sallallahu got ashadda ghadab, and he got so angry because some people can't handle that. So this wording is important because it also goes back to the last point: accountability and responsibility. If I know I'm part of the da'wah, I'm part of the community, I'm part of the Muslims, what I say can impact all of us. Just like if I were to, say something unbefitting, it may harm others. So I have to always remember, I don't want anyone not to come to the masjid because of my lack of mercy. So we have to train us to be more merciful, inshallah ta'ala, and it goes a far way. And when there is need to be harsh, you do it with ilm and hikmah, wisdom and knowledge. Which leads to the third one: humility. So with mercy comes also humility towards who? Her fellow sisters, those who are our peers in our study circle, those who come to these classes, those who are the lay people. You have to have humility, tawadu. And this humility is to do with knowledge, to do with the deen, to do with others. And it's a huge topic because the ulama have written extensively. If someone wanted a lot, you can go to Kitab Madarij Sadiqin Ibn Qayyim. He has a large chapter talking about humility. Humility with the truth, humility with the deen, humility with others. And he talks about the intellectual humility too. And that's part of it as well. That if, like, I'm going to talk about in a minute, intellectual humility, because the talib ilm, right, and the talib ilm, she needs to remember that she's not the most knowledgeable person ever in history of Islam. We know that we're not. Just like any one of us shouldn't think that about ourselves. We are students of knowledge. So if we know that, what are we going to do? Beginners, or even if you're advanced in knowledge, just always remember, I have a long way to learn. فوق كل ذي علم عليم, above everyone who has knowledge, more knowledgeable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim, and amongst the people, nas, the people when it comes to ilm, in knowledge, are in tabaqat. So humility is key. I want to talk about here the humility to do with dealing with others, because once you know that we all have a lot to learn, that's the third stage of knowledge, right? The first stage, you know, you have a little bit, you think you know everything. Second stage, you start realizing that you don't know that much. Third stage, you say you don't know anything, right? The third shibr, when you reach that level, you're like, okay, I don't know anything. And then you come right down. But Abu Hurairah, when he reported here, anhu, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's famous hadith, charity does not decrease wealth. No one forgives another except Allah increases him his honor. And no one humbles himself or herself for the sake of Allah except that Allah raises his or her status. Think about humility as a type of honor. And when I talk about humility, Sahaba, they learned from Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the most humble. I mean, subhanAllah, the way he dealt with the Sahaba is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Because when you see this, you keep seeing them, subhanAllah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam humbling himself. He told them one day, Ana Sayyid, I am the master. I am the leader of Bani Adam. Wala fakhr, but I'm not proud. Imagine, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day a man came to him. Again, he's the most knowledgeable. He's Muslim. He said, I'm the most fearful of Allah. I'm most knowledgeable of him. A man came one day shaking because he met Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sunnah Dawud, Hadith Hassan, or Hadith Sahih. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them, relax. I'm a man who comes from a woman who used to eat dried meat. Yeah, imagine, like, this man was so nervous. He said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the humility, that's ما تواضع أحد لله إلا رفعه. Wallahi, it brings you higher. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. Knowledge lifts you. Humility lifts you. And the ulama, they give the parable of humility. If you want to really teach yourself humility, the more you know, the lower you go. Because when there's a fruit and it bears, well, plant, it bears a lot of fruit, what does it do? It bends over. That's one way of looking at it. And also the example of knowledge. Knowledge is rain, right? It's like water coming down. And the low-lying land collects most water. As for the mountain peak, it collects nothing. Right? So if someone thinks it's up there, right, they have a big ego, for example, if someone had that problem, rainwater doesn't rest on the mountain peak. But low-lying land, when you humble them down, you collect more. So this is the benefit we should take, because it comes naturally with the territory of knowledge. Hence, when the ulama talk about one of the afat, one of the many ill effects that come, or side effects we should use when it comes to seeking knowledge, one of them, and one of the most powerful of them, is this lack of humility amongst the students, infighting, arrogance, envy. We can't forget that. So one way to combat it is just remember, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says here, Allah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah has revealed to me, Allah awha ilayya an tawada'u, that we all have to be humble. So no one oppress another and boast over another. If somebody knows more, or you are, mashallah, have a higher status, one way to show the appreciation to Allah is that you downplay it, you thank Allah, you don't praise yourself. And then leads to the next one, contempt. When someone does have a problem with humility, they hold people in contempt. And you walk in, for example, if you walk into the masjid and you think you're the best in the masjid, that's problematic, right? Salaf would be the opposite. When they walk in, they said, I don't see anyone except I think is better than me. That attitude has a huge impact on what? On not only taming the nafs, but also how you deal with people. If I walk in the masjid thinking I am number one here, and even if I was, this is not true, because Allah is more knowledgeable, and Allah subhanahu favored me, so I'm nothing. Abu Hurairah, we all know the hadith. Let's just take the part we need. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned here, it is enough of an evil for a man to hold his brother Muslim in contempt. One of the challenges sometimes it comes when the more you know, the more you start noticing that people don't know. Again, we all know this, right, from experience that when you know something, you can't believe people don't know it, right? And sometimes it bothers you that people are ignorant, and you think to yourself that, well, subhanAllah, people are so ignorant, right? And you yourself end up talking condescendingly to people, right? And this is not like your fault at times because you actually forget that point, or sometimes you despise people because the ignorant people, they don't know any better. So Dunning-Kruger effect, right? That you think, right, the fallacy, you think that which you learned the other day, everyone knows today. You just learned yesterday, right? For example, hypothetically speaking, we all learned something just yesterday. So if I learned something yesterday, I know people don't know it because I didn't even know it. So now I'm walking around like, how come, man? No one knows anything here. It's like, you don't know. كذلك كنت من قبل. Allah said, likewise, you used to be like this, ignorant and misguided. And what? فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah guided you. And this is one of the most important. I believe that ayah is one of the most helpful techniques to help bring anyone down when they're feeling a little bit too much, right? Just remember, I used to be, yesterday we were all zeros, right? We didn't know nothing. We were not seeking no knowledge. And this will help us to what? To not forget where we came from. So when you see a person who's not very knowledgeable or just coming to the masjid first time or just learning, you empathize. SubhanAllah, I know exactly what that feels like when I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to pray properly. I was reading the Quran wrong. Those feelings, in the beginning of your study. So Surah Nisa, chapter 4, verse 90, verse 94. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلِ. You were likewise like this. It's talking to who? The Sahaba. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فَتَبَيِّنُوا. And Allah favored you. And I think it's important because sometimes the interactions, even amongst the peers, students of knowledge amongst each other, it can come from competition, right? For khair, but sometimes out of contempt. I think like this guy, who does this person think they are? I know more than them. I've been studying longer. It's like, no, no, no. This isn't how we should be doing it. And that leads then to removal of this, getting rid of this. Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, before going there, Allah describes Ahlul Ilm as merciful, as a humble people. So that's a sign to test yourself. If you have more knowledge, how are you? You should be more humble. Allah connected the two in Surah Isra, ayah 108 and 109. Look what he says about the ulama. SubhanAllah, ulama. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ, those who have been given knowledge, مِنْ قَبْلِهِ, before you, إِذَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ, when the verses, the promise of Allah was recited upon them, يُخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ سُجُودًا, they fall on their faces weeping. All right. وَيَقُولُونَ سُبْحَانَ رَبِّنَا إِنَّ وَعْدَ رَبِّنَا مَفْعُولًا. Right? They fall on the face weeping and out of humility. And Allah continues, وَيَخِرُّونَ لِلْأَذْقَانِ وَيَبْكُونَ وَيَزِيدُهُمْ خُشُوعًا. That's the key. وَيَزِيدُهُمْ خُشُوعًا. They have humility, but the ayat make them more humble. So I think this is a good way to help us to fight those mistakes that happen. Ibn Qayyim in Kitab al-Ruh, it's English, just English translation, the book of the soul, page 311 to 312. He talks about difference between humility and degradation. So what's the difference between humbling yourself and humiliating yourself? And look at the point he says, yeah, highlighted this point. Consequently, one does not consider himself superior or deserving. This is when you know you're humble. Rather, he considers others as such. Allah the Magnificent grants this character to those whom he loves only. Allahu Akbar. Only those who he loves. If you think others are better than you, despite you being fathered and they're mafdul, you're better than them by virtue of what Allah gave you, but you think others are better than you. Right? So sometimes what happens is that we may the nafs, right? The shaitan is going to probe the nafs and say, you know what? You are better than these people. You know more. You do more. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me that. They're better than me because they might not do the dhunub I do. And one of the dhunub that you may be doing that they don't do is what? Kibr wal ujub. Right? Kibr with i'jab nafs that you might have at that moment. Arrogance, pride, and self-amazement. Think about it. It's really deep. At the moment someone may think themselves better than others, you already fell into the sin of pride and self-arrogance and self-amazement, vanity, which is a major sin. And you're talking about somebody else who less than you, and they might not even be doing something like that. So one way to get rid of it is like, no, Allah gave me fadl, any virtue, that's from Allah. I try my best to help others. That's why it's really helpful because it also makes learning so much more easier for people, right? Because they're not scared to approach you or any one of us to learn because they know you're not gonna do anything like talk to them in a way that's not befitting, which leads them to a cure. If someone ever has this problem, Ibn Hazm in his kitab, Akhlaq wa-Sir, Morals and Behavior, he has fantastic advice, right? I just summarized some parts of it. Go back to it. It's in English, page 61 and 62, and also in Arabic. He talks about a cure for self-amazement. Look at the beginning. Let's read the beginning. He says, if you're proud, and this is important, if you're proud of your knowledge, okay, so a student of knowledge, if you're proud of your knowledge, you should know that it's not credit to you. It is a pure gift that Allah has granted you. Do not receive it in a way that will anger the Almighty, because He might wipe it from you by subjugating you to an illness which will make you forget all that you've learned and stored in your memory. He said, I've been told this happened to Abdul Malik bin Tarif, or Tarif, died 400 Hijri, who was a scholar and intelligent, moderate, exact in his research, who had been allotted by fate such a prodigious memory that virtually nothing reached his ears that he had to be said to him twice. Now he undertook a journey by ship and experienced such a terrible storm at sea that he lost the memory of most of what he had learned and suffered a considerable upset to his mind. He never recovered his full intelligence. He said, I myself, Ibn Hazm saying this, have been struck by illness. When I recovered from it, I have forgotten all my knowledge, except for a few ideas of little value. I did not regain it. I did not regain it until several years later. Allahu Akbar. Imagine somebody who, when Allah gave them all that knowledge, after so much effort and the bounty of Allah, and then something happens and you lose it all. But we have to think about the question. Some you might lose it if you're misusing it. That part is very interesting. That's one of the ways, like he said, this is one of his cures. He also says you should also remember that you may be deceived by knowledge. For if you do not put into practice what you know, your knowledge will be testimony against you, and would have been better for you if you had never been a scholar. Right? That's another one, right? Or he says you may learn something, you might be right now benefiting yourself with knowledge, which is less importance than the knowledge that you might need. So because of this, you're actually not benefiting that much, right? So what is he trying to say is that if somebody has this problem, or if might find that sometimes shaitan might get to them this way, just remember this, right? Because it really help you. Because in the, end of the day, what is the benefit of knowing all this information? To get better, to benefit people around you, to be a resource for the community, and also to guide the fellow sisters towards the khair, as we studied the example before. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said in the Quran, hujjatun laka aw alayk. Hadith Muslim, the Quran can be a proof for you or against you. So I really like this because it's practical, but also kind of scary too. So that's one way that when we come to meet each other, you got to. I didn't have time, but I mentioned many examples of the ulama, how humble they were. And just for the sake of the one example, the ulama, like the past, the present, Sahaba included, they were always doing things to humble themselves, always. So, for example, one day one of the Salafi saw Abdullah ibn Salam, the Sahabi, who was a rabbi before, he was a Jewish rabbi when he converted to Islam, so he's a scholar, both religions. So Abdullah ibn Salam, we know his, mashallah, status. So one day they saw him walking in the market carrying something on top of his head of like firewood, and they told him, "Didn't Allah suffice you from needing to do this?" He said, "Yes, but I'm doing it so I can humble my nafs. I had to humble myself." So he was walking the market with some firewood on his head to bring down the nafs. And imagine someone set up the stuff that they would do, and the ulama, it's unbelievable humility, right? And these people are deserving of all kinds of levels. And again, it's starting with Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So it's always good to be humble and to remind ourselves that when you meet people, we're not the one in the position to judge how humble we are. Etiquette that we're going to be doing is going to be kind, nice, welcoming. The people are going to judge if we're humble or not, because they're the ones who are going to say, "I felt this way about this person," right? Because of what you're saying and how you're coming across. You may tell yourself I'm humble, but that's not how it's going to work, right? You have to look at, am I actually kind to people? And this idea of istihqar, belittling people, right? So that's another one that we need to be mindful of. The fourth one, and this is connected to everything else, being friendly, approachable, accessible. So to be a student of knowledge, to be a da'iyah, right, from the people who call to Islam, to be from any community position, you need to be friendly. To be a Muslim, you should be friendly. To be a believer should be friendly, especially a student of knowledge, because people are going to return back to you for questions, for help, for guidance. So that means we have to have this quality. The female student knowledge must be friendly because the quality of the believer. Jabir ibn Abdullah anhuma, he says, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the believer is friendly. Al-mu'minu ya'lafu wa yu'laf. The believer is friendly and befriended. وَلَا خَيْرَ فِي مَنْ لَا يَأْلَفُ وَلَا يُؤْلَفُ. There is no good in a person who is not friendly nor befriended by others. And then he finished the hadith, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. And the best of people are those most beneficial to other people. This hadith, and Munawi and others are comment saying, for what does it mean? There's no good one who is neither friendly nor befriended. due to their weakness of their iman, difficult character, and evil nature. Friendliness and harmony is a cause for holding fast to the rule of Allah. And through it, the unity of the Muslims. And the opposite causes discord. So what does Shaitan want in our community? He wants people to be divided. He's going to work hard to cause discord. And how does he cause discord and division? By people not getting along, bad behavior, unfriendliness. And we know as Muslims, we're not supposed to be this way. We have to be open. We have to be able to talk to anybody. People may come to us. We don't know who they are. They may be older than you. They're a Muslim. You say Salaam Alaikum to them. You make them feel like this is like they've been here forever. Alhamdulillah, I can say proudly, Masjid Istiqamah on the brothers and the sisters side, from what I heard, mashallah, very welcoming. We're welcoming people. So this is something we have to thank Allah for, right? That we have that quality. Our masjid has been talked about amongst the lay people like this. So we have to thank Allah and preserve that ni'mah. We have to preserve that ni'mah. So alhamdulillah, I believe that, again, many of these things we're talking about, nobody here is in mind. All of us are sharing it, the benefit, right, to learn together. But also we're learning something to protect what we have. Because if we have any of these qualities, this means we're doing something good. But protect it. Because it's possible that by falling short in even any one of these could lead to our da'wah, our khair to fall short. So if it comes to the fact of being friendly, that's a nature a believer should have. Then the next part behind that is accessible. Because what is the job of the student of knowledge? You're supposed to be a guidance for people. People are going to come to you and ask you questions. People are going to come to you, ask you for help. People are going to confide in you. You have to be a person who is approachable and accessible. Where do we get this from? So we got the friendliness part. How about approachability and accessibility? Hadith Abdul ibn Mas'ud. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says in this hadith, shall I not inform you of the people of whom the fire is unlawful for? So this is very important. The fire is unlawful for. It means it's haram for them to go to hellfire. Again, if Allah so wills, because it's still possible they can go, but this means that this is a promise of Allah. Every person who is near to the people, amicable and easy with people. So what is his qualities? The person is hayyin, or some riwayat have layyin, right? So lenient, sahlin, right? Easygoing, qareebin min nas, near to the people. I want to highlight that word. Qareeb, they're close to the people. حرم على النار كل هين لين سهل قريب من الناس. The hellfire has been haram for the people who are easygoing, lenient, kind, and qareeb. What does qareeb mean? Mullah Ali Qari من قال المفاتيح, he says, rahimahullah, near, that is to the people by sitting with them in their gatherings of obedience and is humoring them. Yani it's like, mashallah, their sociable, their interaction with them within the boundaries of obedience. This is one interpretation. Qareeb means in the gatherings with them, he's nice, he's kind, he's easygoing. So one interpretation, the word sahal and qareeb. Okay, so this is a side benefit. Some ulama, the way that Mullah Ali Qari mentioned here, sahal and qareeb, are they two different qualities or are they one? So some ulama mentioned that qareeb was sahal. Sahal is qareeb. Some ulama say no. There's a second meaning. Some scholars have mentioned it means a person is easy to access when someone needs them. Easy to access means people can find you, right? When they need you, people can find you when they need you. And the benefit we take from this is that if someone is like this, that is a powerful quality for student knowledge. So some ulama say qareeb means qareeb for the people in the sense that you are a person. If there's a hajj, a need, they can call you easily. They can find you, because when it comes to understanding the fiqh, the wordings of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ta'sis awla min ta'keed, right? Or tawkeed or ta'keed. That the origin of words the Prophet uses, if he uses different words, the origin is that every word carries a unique, independent meaning, not that the words are synonyms to each other. This is a qa'ida, a principle to the tafsir of the wordings. So new words are not thought to be synonyms of other words, rather they carry new meanings. So qareeb is not sahal. Qareeb means close. And why do I think this is important? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the greatest scholar of this ummah, anyone can find him. You go to Masjid Nabi, he's right there. In today's time, of course, we're not in the masjid all the time. We cannot always be in the masjid. So how do people find you? They had a problem, they can message you, easy to get along. easy to call, easy to find. And the طالبة and the طالب علم and طلاب علم have to be this way. Because that's your job. Your job is to guide the people. People have to find you when they need you. It can't be, oh, I'm busy. I'm busy, I'm studying and learning. No. You set yourself to seek knowledge. العلم ثم العمل ثم الدعوة ثم الصبر. You have to prepare yourself for that. So I think it's a useful thing because what's the reward for it? Jannah. Sometimes it's not easy to deal with the people. المؤمن what is the hadith? المؤمن الذي يخالط الناس ويصبر على أذاهم. So the believer who mixes with the people and is patient with their harm, خير, is better than the believer who doesn't mix with the people nor is patient with their harm. Hadith. I know sometimes some of us we much rather not just go to read a book, go listen to a lecture, right? Not to deal with some of these problems. But you see, you can't do that. You can't, because at the end of the day, with the struggle comes reward. So sometimes it's important because let's say in our community, we can't find the person. It's always busy, he's doing things, and people are gonna be like, "Well, what is this? I need your help. You're never there." And that's not good either, because you might be friendly, but you're busy, too busy, to the point like no one can find you. And alhamdulillah, I think for the most part, most of us are very accessible, we're very welcoming or kind, but we need to make sure that we capitalize on that. And always, when we're feeling like burning out, remember the hadith of Abdullah Umar, al-mu'minu, the believer, الذي who يخالط الناس, he mixes with the people. ويصبر على أذاهم, and is patient with their harm. And أذاهم, because people give difficulties. أفضل, right, is better من مؤمن الذي لا يخالط الناس ولا يصبر أذاهم. The believer is better than the one who doesn't do it and doesn't mix with them. Both are believers, but one of them went forward. And the last one I want to finish with, inshallah, before taking any questions, is the quality of the big one. Most of us, we usually think about it, and the people that argue over uncultured behavior, right? Which means that student knowledge, female or male, cannot or shouldn't have خوارم المروءة. خوارم المروءة or uncultured, maybe the best way to translate uncultured behavior, or un-Islamic or culturally frowned upon behavior. And this becomes disputable amongst even the students of knowledge, and I believe some of us may have different views on it. What does it mean somebody fell into something uncultured? The student of knowledge should, first of all, not do anything that's considered blameworthy, aslan. But there's some things which are forgivable, some things which are not acceptable. First, al-muru'ah. Al-muru'ah means, as Hafiz Suyuti mentions, amongst others, actions and statements that is the sound and healthy souls, and sound nufus, healthy human being with nice, strong, good fitrah, would find this behavior acceptable. That's called muru'ah. Any quality or behavior, action or statement, normal people, well-behaved people, will find acceptable. So any action which is called khawarim, the disruptors or the puncturer of that behavior, this is what they call it, uncultured behavior, is any action or statement which is not acceptable to the healthy or sound people. And a good person, people of good character, they will frown upon this. And the culture generally frowns upon it. The reason why this is important, طالبة العلم, she cannot be somebody who doesn't care what anybody thinks. No. If you are seeking sacred knowledge, you signed up to be the best example. And therefore, some things nobody should be doing because they're haram. Some things are not haram, but they're lower than the acceptable. So look at the chart on the side here. Khawarim and Muru'ah are in two types. The ulama divided into two types. That which is prohibited, it's muharram, and absolutely prohibited. Nobody has a problem with this one. You have to stay away from that absolutely. Doesn't matter. Not one time, not 10 times, no time. You should not be doing haram things. But the second one is the one of importance. Something which is permissible in origin. Pay attention to this one carefully. Something which is permissible in action. Permissible action in origin. It's halal, mubah. But it's considered disliked according to the custom of the people. And a person does it often. Look at that, these two conditions here. And the last part of the condition. Something which is mubah fil asl, it's halal in origin. But the custom or culture you're in considers it makruh. It's not good to do that. Number one. And then this thing which is considered disliked by the people, you do it all the time or often. There's idman, addiction, or israr, persistence. For something to be uncultured behavior, it must be both frowned upon culturally and then on top of it, persistent, not one-off. Should I give an example? The ulama in the past, they used to talk about min khawarim muru'ah, they said is somebody eating in the market. Okay, that was back then. Marketplace, you shouldn't be eating. They say ulama, they should not be, should not be seen in the market eating. And some must say, subhanAllah, right? You can't go to the food court, you can't go to the mall, you can't drink tea or coffee. No, no. That was then. Now things have changed. I'm going to talk about that. But at that time, if somebody once was caught, right, by some people, the sheikh was caught one time drinking or eating something in the market, that's okay. It's hajj, it's not haram. But it's often there, you know? They would be like, oh, he has a low status. We can't take ilm from him. Some of them will get to that level. No, he's not befitting to be our sheikh. This guy, he falls into the makruhat. Now, the thing I'm saying is that it's makruh because the people don't see it as something cultured. And therefore, the ulama say are not haram, but they've been despised. And Ahlul Ilm, people of knowledge, are supposed to be above that. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen in Sharh Mumti has a beautiful principle then. The principle in regards to what is considered muru'ah or not is, especially on cultural behavior, do not do any statement or not say any statement or do any action that people criticize. If it's something worthy being criticized for, like people will say, why are you doing that? That's not, people of etiquette or people of manners wouldn't do it. And in the place you're in, that is considered khawarim muru'ah. Why is it, what is it connected to student knowledge? What does it do with us? When you go to the masjid, you sit in the halaqah, and you do something which is considered by people brainworthy, people will lose status for you, and therefore they don't respect you and your knowledge you have. So to give you an example, today if I come to the masjid, I'm just speaking loudly. That's considered by most of us unacceptable. For a female, especially for a woman, it's not acceptable if there's people around her who are possibly strange men who could hear her, but also it's against the principle, even if it's just with amongst women, because Allah tells us to generally all of us lower our voice. So if no one is even there, you should not be loud unless it's a hajj. So imagine someone just sees someone just talking loudly. Most of us be like, what is this person doing? And then number two, later they're gonna say this is student knowledge. No, I don't want anything to that person. And you see, the people, they themselves are awam, lay people. They know some things are not befitting for the people of the higher echelons, higher tier. So we got to make sure that we always got to keep in our mind. But remember, it's culturally bound. So Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, one of his examples in Sharh Mumti and others he gives, chewing gum. In Saudi Arabia, chewing gum is khawar maru'ah. And you probably noticed whoever went to Saudi Arabia, a lot of people don't do that. Right? They don't. He says another time chewing gum in this place where we're in Saudi, it's not called the culture. Canada, America, right, the West, we chew gum عادي. Nobody can say khawar here. Everyone's following me. So here, chewing gum is considered fine, totally fine. Maybe in some context you shouldn't chew gum, like maybe you're in a meeting or like something like that. Right? If you're in a meeting or something or some kind of special gathering or a lesson, you shouldn't be chewing gum. But let's say I'm walking the street, playing or just going home. It's my business, right? But in other culture, it can be. So culturally dependent. Next thing we need to know, what are some of those examples? Quickly, I'm going to mention because I want to leave some time for the Q&A. And this is very important because the etiquette in our community, because we're all saying we're students of knowledge, right? We have to lift our levels. Number one, again, I gave the example, sister raising her voice for no reason. So Abdul Wadi'iyah, she has a section on this in her kitab, Sifat Marat Salihah. Allah says in the Quran, chapter 31, Surah Luqman, ayah 19, and be moderate, right? Show no insolence when you're walking and lower your voice. Very the harshest of all voices, the voice or braying of the donkey. So here Allah criticized the raising of the voice, except for, scholars say, when there's a need. Okay, so pay attention to this origin ruling. This is for men and women. But the women, it is more so, right? As we'll see in a second. So Allah says, Inna ankara al-aswat, Inna ankara al-aswati la sawtul hamir. The worst of speech, the voices, is the braying of donkey. So Imam Qurtubi, rahimahullah, in tafsir, amongst others, they say that this ayah teaches us not to raise our voice without excessively or unnecessarily, unless there's and take from this, he says that the general rule is not to raise it unless there's more than what's needed. And also teaches us humility, right? Because you're humble, you lower your voice. Then Abdullah, she writes at the end of the chapter that some women from those whose modesty has been removed, raise their voices, laugh with their friends among strange men or in front of strange men. And as we might find today in the street, two sisters are walking, or two sisters or some, and there's men who are not there, maharim around, they're just laughing publicly, they don't mind. I mean, the correct etiquette would be like if you see men around you laughing, you should lower your voice, stop, because that's not befitting. Not laughing is haram, but the fact it could be fitna. Allah Ta'ala فلا تخضعن بالقول, and that do not be soft in speech, فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض, so that he whose heart is a disease should be moved to desire. فقلنا قولا معروفا, speak an honorable word. So she said this is an act of disobedience and situation should be avoided and this act should be warned from. So in a simple example would be you're in the masjid, you're in a gathering with friends and you guys are chatting and naturally everyone's voice is getting higher. Good, and a good marua is let's lower our voice. Even for men too, right? But then you should not be doing it. But for women, again, student knowledge, female student knowledge, when we know that, hey, maybe people can hear us because we're so loud, it's not befitting. We should not tell ourselves, oh, who cares? No, the Sharia are telling us, and Allah's talking to who? The wives of the Prophet. And this is just a simple example of that uncultured behavior, because people might come and say, well, these people are supposed to be learning deen, right? Why are they so disruptive? Right, for example. And we do it, some all of us are guilty of it. So no one can say they didn't do it before, but we just try to like be more mindful of it. Another one, asking unnecessary questions. This one is very interesting. Personal information, right? A lot of us we don't know, but there's boundaries the Sharia has put up that you shouldn't ask people things that maybe are not, or not maybe, or often not our business. And in the Sharia, when you do that, it's considered khawar al-muru'ah. The araf of the people, the salaf. And this is important. The salaf, many of them did not like uh, doing this, right? And this is the point. We now going to see the hadith we all know about. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Hey, Abu Hurairah, part of a man, perfection of one's Islam is to leave out that which does not concern them. من حسن الإسلام ترك ما لا يعنيه. So, what is considered here bad is to go up and beyond what is necessary. If I'm talking to someone and I ask them, how old are you? Or I need to know how old you are, right? Or someone just told me that, or someone, my close friend, that's different. But imagine somebody I meet them and I ask them, right, how old are you, And then someone will be shocked, right? Because in our culture, we have no problem with this, right? Actually, in our culture, the Western culture, many of us we know growing up here, we ask, we overshare, we talk too much about things. So one of the things that we have to learn is that you ask what is necessary. So some of the ulama went so far to talk up, say that's asking people certain types of questions for their personal, especially someone who you don't know or someone who you're not close to, or someone you barely know. It's considered من إخوان المروءة. Even Suyuti here in his kitab حقيقة البدعة, I gotta fix the spelling there. والسنة, he says bid'ah. Subhanallah. I mean, again, maybe it's not bid'ah, but he went that far. He says miscellaneous bid'ah, right? Bid'ah mutafarriqat, or different types. He says here they're asking about what doesn't concern you. He says a bid'ah, even though it's probably not a bid'ah, more of a different muru'ah. And he mentions the example, asking somebody, where do you come from? Where are you going? He said, this is spying, he says. Shouldn't be asking people that. And it's interesting because sometimes we do it all of innocence. Someone comes in, hey, where'd you come from? It's like, that's not my business, right? If I came, I saw you and you told me you came from somewhere, sure, right? But imagine someone now came and just out of nowhere, just as soon as I see them, I asked them that question. The question someone may ask is, why do you want to know where we came from? So in Islam, we learned that this is not from the Maru'ah of the Sahaba or Salaf. It's not the Maru'ah. And we try to avoid it, only ask what we need. And of course, some people are close to us, some people are further than us. Some people wouldn't mind, like a close friend. You ask them, what are you doing here in the masjid today? They don't mind because you're close to them. But generally speaking, we try to keep the information that we're asking and passing on to what is relevant. One other example is authentically reported by Shafi'i that and the Salaf, they used to dislike asking about somebody's age. That's a good example of one. So one day, a man came to Imam Shafi'i and he asked him, how old are you? When were you born? So Imam Shafi'i said, it's not from the Maru'ah to tell people about their age. And some of the Salaf held that view. Why? Because if someone's older than you, you're going to think they're old. And if they're younger than you might going to disrespect them. So some of the Salaf do not like talking about that. In fact, even until today, in many of the cultures back home, people don't even know their age. They don't tell people their age. And that's why some of them will give you a ballpark estimate. They don't even know how old they are. In the Western culture, like I said, where we come from here, we just talk about anything and everything. And that's one of the problems. A student knowledge has to focus, number one, their time, their benefit, but also difference between a stranger and a close friend, someone I first met, someone I don't know. And this is why, again, we look at this, we can see that, alhamdulillah, in Islam, in order to be well-mannered, is to focus on that which is going to make us closer to Allah. Not to say it's haram, like think about it that way. That's another example. Another one, laughing, joking too much. This is one a lot of us we often hear. Is it allowed to laugh, joke? We have to be moderate. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us not to laugh too much. Laugh little, he said. Much laughter kills the heart. Hadith Sahih Adab Mufrad. That's the origin, laughing too much. But what is too much and what's too less? It depends. Some people's character, they're often humorous. Some people's character, they're always solemn. It's not wrong. Both example, Hassan al-Basri versus Muhammad bin Sirin. We can both, anyone can go research their character. Muhammad bin Sirin, he's always joking. He's always laughing. Sometimes even making jokes that many of us will find shocking. And it's not haram joke, but it's really funny joke, but it's like he will use like a play on words and stuff like this. For example, one day they came to him and he told so-and-so, do you heard so-and-so? What happened? They asked about someone's person, one of his callers. He said, what happened to him? And Muhammad said, he died. And then I was shocked. And Muhammad said, he started laughing. And what he meant by it is he's sleeping. But the other guy was shocked when he heard that he died. Muhammad ibn Sirin, imagine, Ibn Sirin, big Imam. That was his character. And Hassan al-Basri, the opposite. He's always crying. He's always sad. He's always reflecting akhirah. It's just a nature. The reason I'm saying is we can't fight people's nature. But look at Imam Dhahabi and Sadlan and his kitab Ma'alim fi Tariq Talab Ilm. He mentioned a beautiful statement, one of the best. He says that the ulama, they mentioned Imam Dhahabi's statement. Imam Dhahabi, he has a section in Siyar Ala Nubala. What is better, smiling or laughing? Because Nabi Sallallahu always smiled, he didn't laugh, right? A lot, like loudly. So he says, which is better? Imam Dhahabi, he puts a nice discussion, categorization, and it's a summary. He says it is a must. This is a summary. For the one who laughs often and smiles to limit that and blame himself for it, so doesn't become accustomed to it. So the person who laughs too much is always laughing and smiling and try to tone it down. This is what he's trying to say. Why? Sometimes you gotta blame yourself so you don't get too much to it. And the one who's always necessary for the one who's often frowning and sad, that he smiles, improves his character, and forces himself away from the evil qualities. So the person's the opposite. The other one who's always sad, smile. Right? So we get balanced here. I know we hear the statement often, smile is sunnah. It is, but we need to balance both. Then he says, any deviance from the moderation is blameworthy. However, discipline and struggle is necessary for the soul. It's one of the best statements. Like, it depends on someone's nature. If you're often smiling, try to bring it, or laughing, bring it down a little bit. Someone's often sad, smile more, be balanced. And that's a beautiful way to look at it, because at the end of the day, our natures can get the better of us. But what Ibn Jawzi writes in his book about the fools, right? It's not a Sunnah translation, Sketches of Fools and Simpletons. It's the book about the akhbar of the fools. Yani, some of us we know the funny book. If someone wants to have read a book of jokes, yani halal, stories of funny people and foolish people. Akhbar hamqa wal mughaffirin. Excellent book. It's really funny. In the Muqaddimah, he writes, Ibn Jawzi, Ibn Jawzi says, what is not recommended is that making people laugh becomes the habit of the person. So first, he established that making others laugh is not haram. It's not haram. Because when Umar, proof, Sahih Bukhari, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the day he was sad because he was considering divorcing his wives, Umar saw him sitting in the masjid sad by himself. So Umar said, let me tell him a joke so I can make him laugh. Look at this. Umar, everyone knows Umar, and look at the emotional intelligence, right? So he says making people laugh, and it's recommended that making people laugh. It is not recommended that makes people laugh becomes the habit of the person. For little laughter is not to be tested. The messenger used to laugh until his premolar teeth appeared. Yet much laughter is loads, for it is narrated that he said, much laughter kills the heart. Seeking comfort in such things every now and then is like adding salt in the cooking pot to enhance flavor. So that's good. Why did he write this? Because in the Muqaddimah of the book, he's trying to prove, why did he even write a book about akhbar al-hamqa wal-mughaffirin? People are wondering, why are you writing a book of fools and idiots and stories? He said, because, it's a kind of halal entertainment, and it's to listen to it, to read it. And this is balance. The ulama, they make jokes. You probably, again, and maybe later we could share some resources. We need to be balanced. So we don't criticize people for laughing and joking, but not too much. At the same time, we will never laugh and joke. That's not also from da'wah or Sunnah of Islami. They're just always sad. And whoever of the Salaf was like that, Imam Dhahabi says, because they were overcome by the fear of Allah and the Akhirah, and those who were humorous, is because of their nature. So the beautiful way to summarize balance. And to finish, just one example of humility, going back to the example, there's so many. I didn't have time to add more, so maybe I'll add more later. But the sincere, right, humble Sheikh Al-Bani, just an example of humility. He tells us here, rahimahullah, it says in his biography, so this is a book in English if you want to read about stories about Sheikh Al-Bani, Baz Uthaymin, It's called Jewels of the Guidance. It's a PDF, page 120. It's a nice book. It just compiles stories about from the biographies of Sheikh Al-Albani, Ibn Baz, and Ibn Uthaymeen. It's very nice. He writes in there, may Allah have mercy upon the one, upon whoever indicates to me a mistake or defect of mine, for certainly from that which is easy for me, by the permission of Allah, is to retract my mistakes. Once the error has been pointed out to me, and my books which have been printed for the first time, and which those who have been reprinted, are the biggest witness to this. Look at Sheikh Al-Albani's humility. Again, like anytime you made a mistake, second edition, in the Muqaddimah, he will correct it. What someone so told me, benefited me. Or in the same book, you're checking the hadith, he will correct the mistake and say who told him, who benefited him, who shared the advice with him. So that's a great example of intellectual humility. There's so much more. For example, like maybe later on we can gather those examples from the men and the women. But like we know the student knowledge has to be humble. They have to be helpful. They have to be, So another example in this book, one day Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, was in the dars. And a man came running and said, "Ya Sheikh, the washroom sink or the it's the pipe is broken. The water is spilling." So the Sheikh's in the middle of dars. Sheikh stopped the dars. They all went to the washroom, and the Sheikh himself was there fixing it with all of them. And with the humility, and he interrupted the Sheikh, but it was an emergency. The waters, the washroom, the Mizbah flooded. But they took the humility. The Sheikh came out, they fixed it himself. Even they mentioned, for example, about the ulama, the humility of the way they were. And again, these are just examples of humility. There's also examples of other things, like for example, how they dealt with the lay people, how they dealt with the new Muslims, right, and stuff like this. So maybe inshallah later on, maybe the notes, I'll add some more of this into the notes before I share it. I think I've taken quite a bit of time here. Anyone has any questions related to this or not, inshallah ta'ala, we'll take. I'm just gonna stop the recording so we have the lecture saved, because sometimes the questions aren't related to the lecture, so I wanna leave it open to both. Barakallahu feekum.